Every country on Earth is trying to find a way to become wealthier. Norway uses a sovereign wealth fund worth over $1 trillion. Singapore turns its surpluses into massive profits. The Gulf Emirates transform oil into endlessly compounding assets. But there is a terrifying paradox. The world's #1 superpower, the United States, is not on that list. Instead of accumulating assets, America is carrying $38 trillion in debt, so large that the annual interest expense alone now exceeds the entire defense budget. If every other nation is using money to make money, then why exactly isn't the United States doing the same? The answer is not as simple as you think, because once you trace the federal financial structure, once you follow how Washington collects, spends, borrows, and pays interest, you discover a chilling truth. America is not becoming poorer because it lacks resources or opportunities. America is becoming poorer because its national financial system was never designed to create wealth. It was designed to spend, to keep the machine running, and to borrow forever. The world is changing. Other nations are getting rich by investing in the future, while America is paying interest on the past. And while most Americans look at that $38 trillion debt as an unsolvable problem, a quiet shift is taking place inside the government. An effort to restructure the nation's asset foundation, a new mindset about how America must survive in the 21st century, and a plan whose true significance most citizens have not yet seen. When you understand what is operating behind these seemingly cold numbers, you realize the problem is not the debt itself. The problem is that America has never had a wealth creation engine to counterbalance that debt. And now is the time to look closely at what is taking shape, because it will determine whether America becomes overwhelmingly wealthy or remains trapped in an endless debt spiral. When people talk about America's $38 trillion debt, many think it's just a giant but abstract number, something the government will figure out. But the truth is that the national debt is not a harmless chart on paper. It operates like a steel press, crushing every American family, every small business, every homebuyer, and every tax dollar collected from the world's largest economy. To understand why America must become wealthy, not as a choice, but as a necessity, we have to look straight at how this debt was created and why it is now attacking the country from every direction. Every year, the federal government collects taxes from citizens and businesses. That is the main, almost sole source of revenue. But for decades, Washington has spent more than it takes in. Congress approves budgets, expands welfare programs, increases defense funding, funds healthcare, subsidies, foreign aid with no clear limits. The result? Spending exceeds income, creating what is called the budget deficit. And when a deficit appears, the government does not cut spending. It borrows. It issues treasury bonds, borrowing money from domestic and foreign investors, pension funds, central banks, and large corporations that want safe assets. That borrowing creates the national debt. But what makes the spiral truly dangerous is this. Debt is only the first step. What turns it into a financial time bomb is interest. When you borrow too much, you have to pay too much interest. And when interest rates across the economy rise, the interest burden grows exponentially. That is exactly what is happening to the United States right now. In just a few years, debt interest costs have exploded to the point of surpassing the entire national defense budget, the budget for the most powerful military on the planet, with bases in more than 80 countries. That means America is now paying more money for its past than for its future. No nation can maintain superpower status if it spends hundreds of billions of dollars every year just on interest, not paying down principal, just interest. That is no longer a budget issue. It is a national security issue. The real spiral begins when rising interest costs force the government to borrow even more, because a huge portion of revenue is now used just as service interest. And when it borrows more, the debt grows interest. Grows, it borrows more again. That is the shape of the national debt doom loop, a machine that eats itself. But the consequences of the debt do not stop at the federal budget. They hit ordinary Americans' lives in 3 ways that few people truly connect. First consequence, taxes must rise. There is no way around it can be avoided. When interest costs exceed defense spending, when the budget is eaten up by financial obligations, the government will have to find more money, and the only place to get it is taxes. If spending is not cut, taxes will go up. It may not be federal income tax immediately, but indirect taxes, fees, reduced deductions, higher corporate taxes, everything will find its way into people's pockets. Second consequence, the dollar loses value. When the government borrows excessively and continually has to create more dollars, whether through bond issuance or indirect money printing via monetary policy, the dollar's purchasing power falls. It doesn't require hyperinflation. Just 2–3% depreciation per year is enough to destroy people's buying power over the long term. That is why food, housing, cars, insurance keep going up. Americans are not living more luxuriously. Their money is simply worth less. Third consequence: higher interest rates for everyone. This is the point most Americans fail to connect. The interest rate you pay on your mortgage, credit cards, car loan is directly tied to how creditworthy the government is perceived to be. When debt is too high, investors demand higher yields to lend to the government. Treasury yields rise, market interest rates rise, every personal loan becomes more expensive. That is why buying a home is the hardest it has been in 4 decades. Small businesses are closing and student loan borrowers are desperate. And this is the moment to talk clearly about treasury yields, one of the most powerful yet least understood tools in the U.S. economy. The treasury yield is the return the government must pay its lenders. When yields rise, it means investors are demanding higher returns to accept the risk of holding U.S. debt. When yields go up, everything in the American economy pays higher interest: mortgages, auto loans, credit cards, business loans. And because U.S. debt has ballooned so large that investors have become cautious, they demand higher yields. The government's borrowing costs rise. The deficit grows, debt grows, yields rise again. Once again, the noose tightens around America's neck. All of this leads to one clear conclusion: America does not have a spending problem. America has an asset problem. Yes, America spends a lot, but the real problem is that America does not create national assets fast enough to offset it. America does not manage its national cash flow like an investor. While Norway, Singapore, and the UAE generate tens of billions in profits every year from their national assets, America lets its assets sit idle inside non-income producing spending programs. In other words, America is not poor, America simply does not act like a rich country. And that is exactly why America must become wealthy. There is no other choice left. If the United States does not start creating national assets on a massive scale like a real investment economy, the debt spiral will keep tightening and the next generation of Americans will pay with a lower standard of living, fewer opportunities, and a weaker America on the world stage. This is the backdrop that has made Trump's secret plan the only remaining option. A strategy not to shrink America, but to expand America by making assets grow faster than debt. And if that strategy succeeds, the United States will not merely escape the debt crisis, it could become wealthier than at any point in its history. When the question is asked, what will America do with this $38 trillion debt? Washington usually offers 3 doors, but in reality only one door is viable. The other 2 lead to recession, instability, and national decline. Door #1, cut spending. It sounds logical: if you're in too much debt, spend less. But that only works for a household or a business. A country works completely differently. Federal spending is the lifeblood of tens of millions of jobs. The military, teachers, healthcare, infrastructure, business subsidies, scientific research, welfare programs. Sharp spending cuts would mean laying off millions, shutting down essential programs, and sending the economy into immediate recession. When government spending drops, GDP falls, unemployment skyrockets, markets panic, consumer spending collapses. And the irony is that tax revenue falls, making the deficit even worse. Simply put, America cannot save its way out of debt. Door #2, raise taxes. This is the favorite solution of traditional budget hawks, but raising taxes in an economy already strangled by debt triggers a dangerous chain reaction. Higher taxes cause businesses to hire less, households to spend less, production to fall, investment to dry up, and innovation to slow. When productivity falls, growth falls. The result? America becomes even less able to pay its debt. Moreover, the American people, already crushed by 40-year high inflation and cost of living pressures, will not accept significantly higher taxes. Social unrest, political conflict, and nationwide protests are guaranteed. History shows that no heavily indebted nation has ever sharply raised taxes without paying the price in stagnant growth and lost social trust. And when the people pushback comes, the government goes right back to borrowing. The spiral continues. Door #3, create national assets. This is the only path that does not destroy growth, kill jobs, or weaken the population. Instead of shrinking America, this path expands America, making national assets grow faster than debt. This is the secret the world's wealthiest nations have used for decades. Norway is not rich because it saves well. It is rich because its $1 trillion sovereign wealth fund invests around the globe. Singapore is not rich because of low taxes. It is rich because Temasek and GIC generate steady national profits. The UAE is not rich because of oil. It is rich because it turned oil into infinitely compounding investment assets. Meanwhile, the United States, with the most innovative economy on earth, does not behave like an investing nation. And this is where Trump's strategy comes in. Instead of forcing America into austerity or making citizens pay more taxes, Trump's strategy seeks to change the foundational structure, turning the United States from a debtor nation into an owner nation that generates profit-producing assets, not by expanding bureaucracy, but by smart, strategic investments focused on the industries that will create profit and economic power for the next 50 years. Chips, AI, strategic energy, rare earths. This is the model of an American strategic wealth engine, an asset engine that most Americans have not yet clearly seen, but it is gradually taking shape. And if this engine works as intended, it can transform the entire financial future of the United States. When Trump returned to the White House and declared that America must become an investing nation rather than just a borrowing nation, he ordered the Treasury Department and Commerce Department to produce, within 90 days, a plan assessing the feasibility of establishing a sovereign wealth fund modeled on Norway, Singapore, and the UAE. That plan was never widely released. There were no big speeches, no publicity campaigns, but the remarkable thing is this: while Washington was still debating, the United States had already begun acting like an investing nation, not in theory, in practice. The clearest evidence is in the public investments that few people noticed. The Commerce Department poured $9 billion into Intel, an enormous investment that even a real sovereign wealth fund would think twice about before deploying. At the same time, hundreds of millions of dollars flowed into MP Materials, the key company in the rare earth supply chain that China has monopolized for decades. And if you look closely at the new federal spending categories, you see dozens of projects aimed at rebuilding semiconductor self-sufficiency, restoring high-tech manufacturing capability, and massively expanding investment in AI, the field regarded as the 21st century engine of economic power. Taken together, all of this forms a complete picture. Even though the National Fund has not yet appeared on paper, the United States is quietly building the same model that the wealthiest nations in the world have operated for decades. The important thing is not the name, it's the function. The United States is starting to invest in strategic assets, assets that can generate profits for decades, while also giving America control over the future of global technology. To fully grasp the depth of this strategy, we have to look at the role of each sector. AI, first of all, is not just a tool for generating content, images, or automating office work. AI is the new battle for economic power. The nation that leads in AI will control production optimization, military automation, labor productivity explosion, accelerated research, and even reshape how humans work. If America falls behind, it won't just lose a tech sector, it will lose its core economic advantage. Semiconductor chips are the foundation of all modern life. Smartphones, electric vehicles, fighter jets, guided weapons, supercomputers, smart grids, and AI itself. No chips, no technology. The danger is that for many years, America allowed Asia to control most of the chip supply chain, leaving the country vulnerable to geopolitical crises. Public investment in Intel and new chip factories is not just spending, it is a declaration that America is taking back control. Rare earth elements are the strategic raw materials where more than 80% of global supply once came from China. They are required in weapons, radar, batteries, electric vehicles, satellites, F-35 jets, even smartphones. Any nation that wants to maintain military power must secure its rare earth supply chain. Pouring money into MP Materials is therefore not just an economic investment. It is an act of national security protection. A country cannot dominate the 21st century without controlling chips, AI, and rare earths. And right now, the US government has begun dispersing capital into all three. This leads to a crucial truth that most Americans have not yet realized. The secret of this plan is not that it is hidden, but that its strategic significance goes far beyond how the media is describing it. The media says the government is supporting businesses, subsidizing, or promoting domestic manufacturing. But anyone familiar with the sovereign wealth fund model recognizes this is not support. This is investment. This is not spending. This is creating income-producing assets. This is not firefighting. This is the strategic restructuring of America. Washington has always operated as a debtor nation. Spend first, figure out the money later. But the model Trump is driving toward turns America into an investor nation. Create assets first, then use those assets to build lasting economic power. If this shift continues, the United States will no longer have to rely on taxes or debt to remain a superpower. Instead, America will operate like the wealthiest nations on earth, using assets to create more assets, using profits to reduce debt, and using technological production capacity to stay number one. This is the quiet but decisive transformation of America's future. A national investment engine being switched on, one capital flow at a time right in front of the public, while most people do not yet recognize its economic power. If the national investment strategy America is quietly rolling out under Trump truly succeeds, the country will enter an entirely new era. National assets growing faster than debt, public investment profits flowing back into the budget, easing deficit pressure, and for the first time in decades, America will not have to borrow money just to keep itself running. The $38 trillion debt won't magically disappear, but it will become proportionally smaller, like a person worth $10 billion seeing a $1 million debt as pocket change. This is the scenario. Norway and Singapore have already proven when assets grow faster than spending, the nation literally becomes rich. Given America's economic scale, technology base, and innovation capacity, if the national investment engine works properly, the United States could become the wealthiest nation in human history, not just in GDP, but in total national net worth. But if the strategy fails, the price will be enormous, and the ones who pay are not the government. They are ordinary American citizens. When government invests badly, like the 2008 General Motors bailout, the result can be tens of billions of dollars evaporating. GM received billions in rescue money and still went bankrupt. The biggest losers were taxpayers. Now, imagine that happening on a much larger scale in extremely high-risk technology sectors. Failure of a national investment strategy could create massive bad debt, higher interest pressure, force the government to borrow even more, and ultimately lead to higher taxes, higher inflation, and markets distorted by politicized rather than profit-optimized investments. This is exactly the downside that financial experts warn about. If not managed correctly, an investing nation can turn into a nation gambling with its people's money. But in every risk there is opportunity, and this opportunity is large enough to change the lives of those who understand it. If the U.S. government is truly shifting from a money-spending nation to an investing nation, federal capital flows become the strongest possible signal for private investors. When billions of government dollars pour into an industry, that industry is virtually guaranteed to explode. The three sectors that benefit most clearly are the three pillars of the new national investment strategy: AI, semiconductors, and rare earths. AI will create the new economic power, automation, optimization, supercharged productivity. American companies that lead in AI will become more influential than 20th century oil giants. Semiconductors are the foundation of every smart device. America is pouring money in to ensure that in 10 years no country can hold America's technology supply chain hostage. Rare earths, the backbone of defense, are the sector that can generate enormous profits once America wrests back control of strategic resources dominated by China. However, while these three sectors receive massive tailwinds, green energy risks being left behind. Not because it is unimportant, but because federal resources are being redirected to sectors considered higher priority national security emergencies. Investors who see this clearly will know exactly where money is leaving and where it is flowing. The reality is, in a national asset restructuring, money doesn't disappear. It simply moves, and the people who get rich are the ones who see where the money is going before everyone else. That is why this is considered the biggest asset restructuring in America in 50 years. And why financially savvy Americans will treat it as a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Whoever understands the money flows understands the future. And this time, the future is being rewritten, while most Americans still haven't realized what is really happening. Looking at the entire picture, the truth becomes crystal clear. America is carrying a gigantic debt on its back. The old spending structure no longer works. And if it stays on the current trajectory, the American people will pay with higher taxes, higher inflation, and a lower standard of living. That is precisely why Trump has activated a completely different strategy, one based on national assets instead of national debt, on investment instead of depletion, on real growth instead of deficit expansion. This is a historic pivot point. Either America enters an era of unprecedented prosperity where national assets grow so fast the $38 trillion debt becomes proportionally tiny, or America continues paying for decades of economic mistakes. Both the opportunity and the risk are at generational highs. And those who understand this strategy and see the shifting capital flows will be the biggest lifetime beneficiaries. Because in the end, as with every economic empire, America's economic future will not be decided in Washington. It will be decided by those who understand what is about to happen and act first. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next analyses on the economic moves that are shaping America's future. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.